The British Grand Prix stirred up quite the controversy. Oscar Piastri was almost certainly going to win. He had the edge over Lando Norris pretty much the entire race, and then had the win taken away from him because of a penalty due to a safety car infringement. I can understand where the penalty came from, but I also feel that maybe it wasn't entirely the right call. Let's get into why I think that is. Hello everybody, my name is Michael, and welcome back to Last to First. Let's begin with why I think maybe that wasn't entirely the right call. First, it's very standard for drivers to dramatically slow down for the safety car before it goes into the pit so that they can get a gap between the safety car and a bunch up the field. In this scenario, the safety car lights turned off very late into the lap, resulting in Piastri feeling the need to bunch up the field quite quickly, maybe quicker than normal, although we'll get into that he did a very similar thing earlier on in the race. My second reason for why I think maybe it wasn't entirely the right call is both a reason why I think it wasn't the right call and also why it could have been the right call as well, and that's because of the conditions during the race. At this point of the race, the conditions were improving quite a lot compared to what it was at the time of the initial safety car for the reason that it came out to begin with. It really wasn't dangerous like it was to begin the safety car. Had it been earlier on when the conditions were a lot worse, I could understand the need to be even more cautious, but it really wasn't particularly bad. I mean, the spray is always not ideal in modern day F1, but the flashing red lights on the back of the cars are there for a reason, and also the drivers are knowing that the lead car dictates the pace and can brake heavy at pretty much any point. Third, I feel that Versappen was probably just being dramatic. Just like in Canada, he was a bit over the top with that incident as well. I don't think it's a coincidence that it was Verstappen involved in this situation again. The steward said that Verstappen had to take evasive action, but I think that was maybe stretching it a little bit. Verstappen had realistically plenty of time to react and slow down, in my opinion, and he never made any type of contact with Piastri for it to be that big of a deal, in my opinion. Fourth, it feels as though the outcome impacted the penalty decision. Even though it should not, it does feel that way. It's really hard to not feel like the outcome was influenced, or the outcome did influence the decision, even if it's not supposed to be the case. I genuinely believe the stewards acted in good faith, but they're human. Seeing Verstappen spin so soon after that incident may have affected the ruling, consciously or not. So I think that could have had an impact on things. My fifth reason I touched on earlier, and that was really just the inconsistency with an earlier incident, and that was on lap 17. On lap 17, Piastri did basically the same exact thing. He was at a very similar speed, braked a similar amount, and slowed down a very similar amount. The FIA did unofficially review it. They took a look at it, but they didn't give any penalty, and they gave no warning at all to Piastri. I'm not sure that that's necessarily standard or a requirement for them to do that, but I think if they believe that was maybe questionable, you would think that they would say something, but maybe that's just not something that can happen. But really, the difference between the two penalties was that no one passed, or the two incidents was that no one passed him earlier on, the earlier incident, but Verstappen did at the second restart. So is that a coincidence? Not so sure about that. I think the penalty in general was pretty questionable, but at worst, it did feel a bit harsh. Maybe they could have given him a 5-second penalty instead of the 10-second, but I understand it has been pretty standard for them to start issuing 10-second penalties this year so that it actually hurts the driver's race, because sometimes 5 seconds really isn't enough. While I think the penalty was a little questionable, I can understand where they were coming from and can understand why there was a penalty applied. The first reason why I can understand that is that the rules are very clear. There is no erratic braking under the safety car. So if you believe that what he did was erratic, then a penalty makes sense and it's well within the rules. The fact that he didn't receive a penalty earlier in the race, but he did for this time, suggests that to me, it wasn't all that erratic since it had been done before and there wasn't a problem, but it's neither here nor there. Now, the second reason is, of course, the weather conditions. And the weather conditions certainly weren't as bad as a few laps prior, but it certainly wasn't a clear track and sunshine, and it certainly wasn't perfect conditions by any means. Even a semi-wet track will create low visibility with how much these cars spray water into the air these days. So that definitely went into their decision to penalize Piastri. The third reason why I can understand the penalty is that it's got to be safety first. Even if it wasn't reckless, the stewards may have acted to prevent future incidents. Maybe they wanted to set a precedent to maintain safe practices during safety cars in the future. The last reason is that I can understand the penalty versus not having a penalty when putting it in a context with Russell's incident in Canada. In Canada, Russell braked in a much less dramatic way and the conditions were perfectly fine. Russell went from 140 kilometers an hour with 30 psi of braking force, while Piastri went from 218 kilometers an hour to all the way down to 52 kilometers an hour with nearly double the braking force. So that's a pretty serious stomp on the brakes in wet conditions. I didn't believe that Russell deserved a penalty at the time, but I can understand more why they penalized Piastri in this case because of how dramatic that change was. So, did the FIA stewards make the right call? Technically, they followed the rules if you believe Piastri was driving erratically, but in the context of things, it does feel a little bit maybe inconsistent and overly harsh. We saw the same driver have a very similar action with two different outcomes, and I think that's definitely a problem. Piastri lost a likely win, and here we are kind of questioning the stewards once again. So let me know what you think. Was it fair, or did Oscar Piastri get robbed of the win? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more F1 videos.